throne room in the imperial palace is in chaos. Outside, rioters run unchecked through the city, looting and burning indiscriminately. Inside, the emperor, panicked, dithers, deciding finally to abandon the city and flee for his life. He looks to his empress for support, but doesn't find it. Instead, she stares him down coolly, saying, "If flight were the only means of saving the emperor, yet I would not consent to flight. Those who have worn the crown should never survive its loss. Never will I see the day when I am not saluted as empress. If you wish to save yourself, my lord, there is no difficulty. We are rich, over there is the sea, and yonder are the ships. Yet reflect for a moment whether, when you have reached a place of security, you would not gladly exchange such safety for death. As for me, I hold with the ancient saying that the purple is the noblest shroud." This extraordinary response is enough to strengthen the emperor's resolve. The second and most glorious phase of Justinian the Great's reign is about to begin. But first, a lot of people have to die. Petrus Sabatius was born in 482 CE near Skopje in the Balkans. His father died when he was young, and his family's circumstances were modest, but they had one major connection to a wholly different world. Petrus's uncle, Justin, served in the imperial guard in Constantinople. Even as a young man, Justin recognized his nephew's potential and summoned young Petrus to Constantinople, where he received a comprehensive education in law, theology, and military strategy, which was rare for someone of his rural background. But this wasn't just an act of selfless altruism on Justin's part. Justin had risen from humble beginnings himself, and he understood the importance of patronage and loyalty. By bringing his nephew to the capital, he ensured that his family would have a lasting legacy, but he didn't just bring him to the heart of the empire, he prepared him to lead it. Petrus's father died when he was young, and so when he came to Constantinople, Justin adopted him, making his nephew his official heir. In response, Petrus adopted the name Flavius Petrus Sabatius Justinianus, commonly shortened to Justinian. Justinian quickly became part of the Candidati, the elite palace guard, giving him proximity to power and influence, but it wasn't until Justin became emperor in 518 that Justinian came into real power. Justin named him Comes, a high-ranking court title, promoted him to commander of the army, and eventually appointed him Caesar in 525 CE, making him heir to the throne. During Justin's reign as emperor, Justinian played a crucial role as his most trusted advisor and administrator. Though still officially a junior figure, Justinian was deeply involved in the day-to-day governance of the empire. He helped shape imperial policy, oversaw legal and religious matters, and managed diplomatic relations. His education in law and theology made him a valuable asset, especially as Justin aged and came to rely more heavily on his nephew's judgment. Justinian's health began to really decline in the mid-520s, and he increasingly delegated responsibilities to Justinian. On April 1st, 527, Justinian was crowned co-emperor, formally sharing the burdens of rule with his uncle. Just a few months later, on August 1st, Justin died, probably of natural causes related to old age and illness. With Justin's death, Justinian assumed full control of the empire. His ascent was smooth and largely uncontested, thanks to years of careful preparation and public visibility. He was 45 years old. Let's pause for a moment and rewind 30 years to around 497. While Justinian is 15 and studying hard in Constantinople, elsewhere in the city, Theodora is born. Like Justinian, her father died when she was young, but unlike Justinian, there was no rich uncle to elevate her. She had to work to help her family, and so at the age of around 12 or 13, she became an actress and acrobat in the circus. Now, there are two words in that sentence that need clarifying. Firstly, circus. We're not talking clowns and elephants on unicycles here. The circus in Justinian's time, especially the Hippodrome of Constantinople, was the epicenter of public life, combining chariot races, political theatre, and social spectacle. It was far more than just entertainment. It was a battleground of factions, ideologies, and imperial influence. The Hippodrome itself was a massive U-shaped stadium that could hold up to 100,000 spectators. The emperor's box was connected directly to the Great Palace. Remember this, it'll become important later, allowing the ruler to easily come and go, to observe and to participate in the spectacle. As you've probably seen from movies, the main attraction was chariot racing, often involving 4-horse teams that raced at breakneck speed. Races were only 7 laps long, but ancient sources, including the historian Procopius and chroniclers like John Malalas, described them as extremely dangerous. The chariots were light and fragile, and drivers could be thrown out, trampled, or dragged to death if entangled in the reins. But while injuries and deaths were common, successful charioteers could become fabulously wealthy. The best known example is a racer called Porphyrius, a legendary charioteer of the early 6th century who was celebrated in inscriptions and statues in the Hippodrome itself, and somehow managed to have a career that lasted for 40 years. He's the only known charioteer to have twice won the Diversium, a race format where the winner of a race drives his opponent's horses in a second race and wins again, proving superior skill. Something for Formula One to think about there. The circus was dominated by 2 major factions, the Blues and the Greens. It would be a mistake to think of these groups as just sports teams. They were sports teams, but they also wielded political and social influence and often clashed violently. The factions would act as surrogates for political and religious movements, with the Blues often aligned with the aristocracy and orthodoxy, and the Greens aligned with the common people. It would be no surprise to find that Justinian was known to be a strong supporter of the Blues, and his favouritism towards the faction was so pronounced that it contributed to tensions in Constantinople, especially with the rival Greens. So much so that over time, Justinian had to try to balance his stance and reduce factional influence, although his earlier bias still remained a sore spot for a lot of people. As for Theodora, her father had been a bear keeper for the Greens, which suggests her family probably had ties to that faction, although as a performer in the Hippodrome she would likely be interacting with both sides. After marrying Justinian, spoilers, she became closely associated with the Blues. The circus was a place where public grievances were aired and factional rivalries sometimes escalated into full-blown riots, but for performers like Theodora, the circus was also a stage for social mobility, although one fraught with stigma. Which leads us to the second word that needs some explanation: actress. The performances in the Hippodrome were often bawdy or provocative, and actresses were expected to entertain large, rowdy crowds. The line between performer and courtesan was blurred. Many actresses were also involved in sex work, either by necessity or just through expectation. The profession was not regulated, and performers were often viewed as morally suspect. Actresses were considered part of the lowest social tier, and despite their visibility, they had no legal protections. Their reputations were vulnerable to slander, especially from hostile historians like Procopius, who I mentioned a bit earlier, who portrayed Theodora's early life in rather lurid and exaggerated terms. I won't go into his description of Theodora because I think it's far too suspect to be entirely reliable. If you want to know all the details, check out The Secret History. Suffice it to say, he was not a fan of Theodora's and certainly wasn't shy of trashing her reputation at every opportunity. Justinian and Theodora likely met in Constantinople in the early 520s. By that time, Theodora had already left her career as an actress and was living a more modest life as a wool spinner. After travelling through the eastern provinces, she'd returned to the capital, where her intelligence, wit and charm began to attract attention in elite circles. Though her past as a performer carried social stigma, she had embraced Christianity and was known for her sharp mind and eloquence. Justinian, who by this time was already a rising figure in the imperial court, was by all accounts captivated and saw in her not just beauty, but a formidable partner. Their relationship quickly deepened, and Justinian became determined to marry her, despite legal barriers that forbade nobles from marrying actresses, or former actresses. In 525, Justin passed a special law that allowed the marriage, showing just how serious Justinian was about Theodora. As well as needing to have a law passed so it could happen, their marriage was unusual in another respect too. It seems that they married primarily for love. It's a very uncommon thing to do at the time, and certainly for men in Justinian's position. Marriage was an important institution meant to regulate partnerships and legitimize offspring, but among the upper classes, marriages often helped secure or consolidate power, social networks, and political bonds, especially for the emperor and his court. Women typically didn't choose their own spouses. Their father or male guardians usually decided the match. Daughters over 25 could sometimes oppose proposed marriages if the suitor was immoral or brutal, but this was rare. Matchmakers frequently arranged marriages, particularly among elites, and unions across classes were generally avoided. A marriage across such a vast social divide as Justinian's and Theodora's was unusual and in some circles considered scandalous. The marriage wasn't just romantic, though, it was also political. Justinian valued Theodora politically as well as personally. He called her his partner in my deliberations, indicating her significant influence. She became his closest advisor, sharing in decisions of state and shaping imperial policy. When Justinian was crowned Augustus, emperor, Theodora was crowned Augusta, empress, alongside him at the same ceremony. This wasn't just ceremonial, it meant that she was recognized as a co-ruler, not just a consort. She sat beside Justinian on the throne, signed imperial decrees, and had her own court and advisors. In Byzantine tradition, the title Augusta carried real political weight. Previously, it had been used in a largely symbolic fashion, but Theodora actively shaped policy and advised on legal reforms. She was equal to Justinian. Theodora's coronation also sent a powerful message to the empire. Background does not define destiny. As a former actress and outsider, her elevation reinforced Justinian's vision of a meritocratic, divinely guided rule. Foreign envoys and domestic officials were expected to treat her with the same reverence as the emperor. Her presence in mosaics, laws, and diplomatic affairs reflects this shared sovereignty. Between 527 and 532 CE, Justinian focused on consolidating power, reforming imperial law, and navigating rising social unrest. Early in his reign, he appointed two key figures: Tribonian, a brilliant jurist tasked with codifying Roman law, and John the Cappadocian, a ruthless administrator who oversaw tax collection and fiscal reform. Tribonian was respected for his legal intellect, but criticized for alleged corruption and favoritism. John, meanwhile, was widely feared and despised by the public for his harsh methods and extortionate taxation. Despite their reputations, though, both men were good at what they did and were instrumental in advancing Justinian's agenda, although it came at a cost. Justinian's legal reforms began with the Codex Justinianus in 529, the first installment of what would become the Corpus Juris Civilis. This monumental legal project unified and clarified centuries of Roman law, reinforcing imperial authority and streamlining governance. At the same time, John the Cappadocian implemented aggressive tax policies to fund military campaigns and public works. Meanwhile, Justinian entrusted Belisarius, a young and talented officer, with key campaigns along the eastern frontier. He most likely met Belisarius when Belisarius was serving as an imperial guard under Justin. He was born in what is now southern Bulgaria, joined the army young, and impressed his superiors, including Justinian. In 530, Belisarius led Byzantine forces to a major victory against the Sassanid Persians, a triumph that boosted morale and solidified his reputation. The following year, he suffered a setback which exposed the challenges of maintaining control in Mesopotamia. Despite the mixed results, though, Belisarius' leadership and tactical brilliance earned him Justinian's continued support. So by 532, 5 years into his reign, Justinian had assembled a formidable team of legal, financial, and military strategists. His reforms were reshaping the empire's internal structure, while Belisarius' battlefield experience was preparing Byzantium for ambitious reconquests. But in the capital, all was very far from well. Justinian's crackdown on dissent during the early years of his reign was marked by aggressive surveillance, censorship, and the use of force to suppress opposition. Justinian had a rather autocratic style of leadership that didn't go down well with everyone, and the people he chose for significant positions weren't always gentle in their actions, and the way they went about their jobs often added to the tension. He empowered officials like John to root out critics, often through intimidation, torture, and confiscation of property. Religious dissenters, particularly heretics and non-Chalcedonian Christians, faced persecution under laws that reinforced Orthodox doctrine. Even within the bureaucracy, suspected conspirators were purged or exiled. These measures helped Justinian centralize authority and silence rivals, but they also fueled resentment among the population. These tensions, combined with Justinian's favoritism towards the blues in the Hippodrome, created a volatile atmosphere in Constantinople. After a promising start, things were about to go spectacularly wrong for Justinian. Just how wrong? We'll find out next time. So join me then as we look at the turning point in Justinian's reign, the events that led to Theodora's inspiring speech, and the consequences of Justinian's decision to stay and fight. Until then, please remember to like, share, and subscribe on your way out, and whatever you're up to, have a great day.